Okay. So you guys want me to watch this video, and I guess I will. I guess the time is now. Go call the CIA. I'm gonna call Donald Trump. I'm gonna make sure he knows about this.
Hello, ballers! What's going on? It's Preacher. The Azerite armor, is it boring? Is it not? What is it all about, actually? Like, we've not seen, I don't think I've seen anybody do a full overall look at this side by side, so we can actually gain some conclusions. So that's what we're going to do today, because BFA has had some negativity around it from my channel, mainly because I'm a big fan of class development, how characters play. I encourage skill increases. I think it's much more beneficial if you do something cool and you're aware you did something cool. I think you have a far more satisfying experience in the game, and it feels good. Generally, it just feels really good. BFA is taking a lot of that away, and the Azerite armor is the thing. The rental armor is what people are calling it, which is Blizzard's new model, is providing bare bones sort of skeletal classes and then patching them with what they call rental gear, or what we're calling rental gear, because that's going to go away in the next expansion, where they can kind of patch over it again with a new system. That seems to be the model since Legion. Like it or not, that is what we're doing. And in BFA, we are losing quite a lot.
Wait a minute, guys. The audio should be fine, right? Is the audio not fine? Can I have a mod tell me if the audio is fine? Because if the audio is fine and a mod tells me that it's fine, can you turn it up a bit? Okay, I will turn it up a bit. All right, this is as high as it goes.
So I need to be clear on this. We're losing, obviously, the Azerite weapons and all the minor traits, passive or not, that modified how our characters plays. They were then further modified by the Broken Shore and increasing some extra traits and concordance, which gave us more modifications to how our character played. We then had legendary items, which we could select 2 of a pool of a lot, and to mix and match. A lot of people seem to think that we only ever used 2. I'm sure lots of players did only ever use what they consider to be the best 2, but
that's what I did.
Certainly at the higher end, which is where I want people to try and get to, again, for that satisfying experience, we used a whole bunch of different legendaries on a regular basis. I personally carry like 8 in my bags on my mage and use them all. On top of that, of course, we're losing tier set bonuses. Now, we need to address something here, which is being touted as kind of a retaliation, is that Blizzard never outright said that Azerite armor is to replace any of those systems. That's 100% true. I've been back and watched BlizzCon, both the deep dive panel and, of course, the introduction to this thing, and I've looked at all the posts Blizzard have made. They never outright say that Azerite armor is to replace artifact weaponry, or to replace legendaries, or to replace tier set bonuses. But that doesn't give them a free pass for those guys who...
See, they say that they're not going to have it replace it, but obviously it's like they say something like this, and it's very clear that that's clearly the intent.
They're saying that because they absolutely 100% alluded to that being the case. For example, they would say Azerite tier set bonuses no longer make sense in a world where we have Azerite armor, which is doing something similar, right? They're not 100% saying it's replacing it. They're right, they're not saying that sentence, but they're absolutely alluding to that. And I also think common sense tells us that with playing Legion, we have an artifact weapon, which we leveled up. It takes up an item slot.
That's
true.
In
BFA, we have a necklace, which levels up. It takes an item slot.
The
artifact weapons gave us class-specific abilities, and the Heart of Azeroth allows us to choose class-specific abilities in our Azerite armor. I think it's fair and reasonable to say that it is a replacement for that system, and I will stand by that to the end of time. Most of you are going, well, of course it's the replacement. I imagine you are, but there are a lot of people out there saying, well, Blizzard never really specifically said that, so that's not the case. It's a brand new thing.
This is something that Blizzard does. They say, you're like, you see something and it's a duck, and then they're like, that's not a duck. And they're like, but it's a duck. They're like, but it's not. And then it just goes around and around and around until finally halfway through the expansion they explain, well, we wanted it to be a duck, but we didn't want people to know that. And then everybody just is fucking... That's just what it is. It's a duck. Call it what it is. It's quacking.
You gain it by doing world quests that gain artifact power. As you can see, go do this world quest, you'll gain artifact power. Artifact power. It's the same name. It's identical in what it does. So I think that's a fair and reasonable judgment. In terms of the legendaries, no mention at all of legendaries that I could find. They're just going away.
That's true.
So we consider that dead.
Well, we don't know if he's talking about Legion legendaries. Then yes, they are going away. But Blizzard didn't say that they're not getting rid of legendaries at all in BFA. It's still on the table.
Now, there is the argument that Legion gave us too much. They gave us far too much stuff. I think that's a good debate to have. I brought it up a couple of times in the daily
Too much.
CDP, whatever you call it, where did Legion give us far too much? I think there's a solid case to be made there. However, I also think the level of regression, should that need to take place, needs to be tempered. My biggest concern with BFA in terms of class design, this has nothing to do with the game overall, this is the specifics of class design and the way things have gone in BFA over the course of the alpha and the beta, is that for me personally, I see very, very little class development whatsoever in World of Warcraft anymore past level 100. Now,
That's true.
I didn't say 110. I did not misspeak. 110 doesn't mean anything anymore at once while BFA is at. 110 is the Legion cap. And 120, which is our current cap. Level 100 is the point where we get our final talent row. That's when you get to choose your final talent row. That's where you actually get to choose something going on for your character that changes how it plays, how it does something. And then for the remainder up until we see till 8.1, there doesn't appear to be much of anything to develop our characters past a pre-cap state. I find that, and I hope some of you also find that, very disconcerting. Very disconcerting. So this brings us to the Azerite armor, and I'm going to illustrate as best I can why I believe that's the case. I'm not saying there's zero class development, but very, very, very little, as in real minor stuff that you wouldn't consider anywhere near on.
I disabled alerts, guys, and that way it won't just kind of get in the way. Yeah, I disabled the alerts.
Par with an artifact weapon, with the new spells and abilities those weapons brought with them, with tier set bonuses, which I will be the first to say weren't always interesting, but there were definitely some very interesting ones out there.
Okay.
And of course, having the option of choosing 2 of a vast pool of legendary items in order to modify your character. To say it's on par, and what I'm going to show you, I think is very disingenuous. And I think it's going to be a big problem for people saying, I don't really see much of a difference in my character besides the number popping off the target's head past level 100. I really don't see it, despite all this systems and grinding I'm going to have to do, which I'm fine with grinding, it's an MMO. But I think this is a major problem, and hopefully I can show it you today. Okay, so I've been through every single Azerite trait in the game.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Every single class and spec, and I've built a list and a sheet of how I would categorize them. So what you're going to see in a moment is I'm going to bring you a spreadsheet. I'm just going to bring up here the actual Azerite armor so you can see what it looks like. For those of you who still yet to see it, we have an outer circle where you have one choice for a class-specific trait. They are not all for your spec. And so there's as a mage, there's a one, a fire one, an arcane one, and then a universal one should you be playing multiple specs all the time.
Let's just put this back on the screen, guys.
Ring. Once you reach purple or epic quality gear, you'll gain this extra ring here, which is shared across all classes. There's a couple of extra ones if you're a healer or a tank capable class, but these are not mage specific. So you will still have these exact traits on a DK, on a demon hunter, on a hunter, all those things. These are all shared. There's about 6 of these. The third ring, which you'll get, is basically a defensive, a very minor defensive. As you can see, I gain a shield every 30 seconds for 1.2k.
Wow.
113,000 HP. It's not a big
wow.
deal. And the final trait on every piece of Azerite armor is, of course, 5 item levels, which is a big deal in
That's
BFA.
familiar,
so
isn't it?
real quick, is BFA items have been re-budgeted. So when they create an item, they say, what item level is this item? Okay, it's 355. We have then a calculation of how much of main stat this item should have at that item level and how much secondary stat this item should have at that level. And that means that as the item level goes up, the calculation obviously increases for each of those budgets, and they can make the items linear, is what they're trying to do. They're trying to make them a linear progress. However, in
that would be
BFA,
good.
They've changed that.
That would
system,
actually be
so
really good.
Secondary stats will remain relatively flat.
Listen to this.
Regardless of item level, they will go up a tiny bit, not enough to make a noticeable difference, at least until the very end of the expansion. However, they've altered.
I want you guys to understand how much dog shit that is, okay? Just so you guys fully get what he's trying to say. So the reason this is bad is because if your secondary stats stay static and they basically stay the same, you go from like 24 to 28% haste over the expansion, the gameplay of your character is not going to change in any sort of a real way unless Blizzard changes it themselves. So you're going to be playing the same character in the same way at the end of the expansion than you were at the beginning. And in previous expansions, one thing that you could look forward to at the end of an expansion is being able to cap out and have a lot of haste, have a lot of mastery, have a lot of critical strike, and be able to do these really, really cool builds and, you know, play your class like this different way. And your class will play differently because you have these advantages of having so much secondary stats. Whereas now, that's not the case because everybody's going to be on the same level for the entire time, it seems.
So that main stat, intellect, strength, agility, and so on, that will exponentially increase. So as our item level gets higher and higher as the expansion goes on, based on what we've seen so far on the math, the amount of main stat will just dramatically increase compared to the secondary stats. And the idea behind that is you will just equip whatever is the highest item level.
Well, you know, because it's too hard for them to understand how numbers work, right? And so they just like, we're going to get right down to the basics where if it's a big number, you just put it on, and that's it. That's all you need to worry about. Just put it on. It's a bigger number. Duh. I mean, come on, man. I mean, what is this? An MMO or something? Give me a break. But no, here's why it's a problem. Okay, here's why it's a problem. And I understand what Blizzard's, why they're doing this. Because what used to happen is that obviously you would have these secondary stats increase a lot, and then you would also have the primary stats increase a lot, and it would create kind of this like exponential growth where one of them is growing exponentially on top of the other one growing exponentially, and we got to like a Diablo 3 situation. So I can see why they have this concern, and it makes sense, but I think the core problem is the fact that there's too much player power growth throughout the expansion. That is the issue. That is the fundamental problem. It doesn't have to do with secondary or primary stats. It has to do with the amount of growth that occurs within an expansion.
Should you have two items of the same item level and one has better secondary stats, you would go with that. But in a lot of cases, it does look, especially further into the expansion, that item level will be king. And that's a target. That's what Blizzard wants to happen. So as you can see, Azerite Armor currently fulfills three slots, which is a head slot, a shoulder slot, a chest slot. Perhaps later down the line, they will be Azerite legs, Azerite trinkets, who knows. They may add extra rings, or they may do something similar to Legendaries and allow you to choose two things from the outer ring, which is the class-specific ring. So you could have something like the passive, which affects all of them, and your class-specific one. They may do something like that. Who knows? They've not communicated out what their intentions are with it. Okay, so I've broken down the Azerite traits into three categories.
Okay.
Some of it is very clever. So when I show you the sheet, the green marked traits are things that are something you can actually do something with. They're a trait that affects how you play in some way. They are some form of class development. Now, does that mean they're exciting or interesting? I leave to you. I'm not trying to coerce you in any way. I just want you to look at them and make your mind up, but I'll show you some examples here. Okay, so we have some examples here. So I would consider these four things to be green quality traits. So for example, for a prot warrior, we have Deafening Crash. Thunderclap deals additional damage, and it extends the duration of Demo Shout by 1 second. Now, this can be really cool. Is it exciting? Again,
no, it's not. You know it's not.
Like a Mythic Plus or a series of difficult blows that come from the boss that you have to deal with.
Come on.
Time, then you could say to yourself, okay, I have the Deafening Crash trait. I can pair that with my Avatar cooldown, which decreases the cooldown of Thunderclap, and that means that I can put my Demo Shout up with Avatar, and I can spam my Thunderclap as much as possible and get a really good lengthy Demo Shout out of it.
A good lengthy what?
That's my gameplay. I consider that a green quality trait. Blood Mist for Feral Druids. Rake deals additional damage and has a chance to grant you Berserk for 6 seconds.
Oh, great.
That's something I need to be aware of. That's something I need to think about, and I can utilize that in some way to get better damage than somebody who doesn't utilize it in some way. Green quality trait. Sharpened Blades for the Rogues. Your auto attacks increase the damage of your next Shuriken Toss or Poison Knife by 8, stacking up to 40 times.
Oh, that's badass.
A spell we might not
ordinarily
use.
That's cool.
Stack up. I'm aware I have this trait.
Yeah.
That means that when that hits,
I like that.
I can add this extra ability in That's going to increase my damage. Green quality trait.
Okay.
Martyr's Breath here for the Holy Paladins. I've tried to do a mix across the board. Light of the Martyr has a chance to cause your Blessing of Sacrifice to additionally heal the target for 35. This effect could stack up to 10 times. Again, small, tiny numbers. Nothing mega here, but it's something I could be aware of. I have this trait. Perhaps I'm going to use Light of the Martyr more often than I ordinarily would. That's because I know I'm going to need to do a big Blessing of Sacrifice at some point, so I can plan around it, I can think about it, it changes my gameplay in some way. Green quality trait. That's what I would consider there. Now, the next category is super interesting for me, because I think it kind of points to maybe what Blizzard's seeing when they're looking at overall gameplay, not just at the top end, but in fact everybody, with common mistakes they're making. And I wonder, and this is again supposition, I'm guessing here, but it does feel like maybe Blizzard thinks that people are far more likely to read an Azerite trait on a piece of armor when they're choosing something than they would their spellbook or their talent tree, which they may have copied from a streamer or a website, something like that. But if they pick up a piece of armor and they go, oh, what is my fire trait?
They're just
more
do the
likely
same
to
thing.
read that than they are to read the other sources. Now, whether or not they just go fire trait and just click it, that's besides the point. But I'm calling these tutorial Azerite traits, and I've marked them on the sheet that we'll see in a minute in like a light yellow. So if you see the light yellow, I consider those to be tutorial traits. So what do I mean by that so we can be clear? For example, this Balanced Druid one. Lunar Shrapnel. Starfall's stars deal an additional 25 damage to nearby enemies when they damage an enemy afflicted by Moonfire. Now, this is an entirely passive thing, and any Moonkin will be just like, that's super horribly boring. Yeah, sure, if you know what you're doing, this is just a passive ability, and all the tutorial traits are entirely passive. But the wording is another reminder that perhaps there's a lot of people just shooting Starfall off without making sure the enemies have dots on. Sounds crazy to a seasoned boomkin for sure, but there may be players having these issues that aren't sure whether I should just be shooting out lunar strikes, for example, and then just starfalling off the back of it, right? Instead of being forced or reminded that they should be putting dots on the targets at all times, because then they have this trait and they're like, oh, I need to make sure Moonfire's up, right? That's really cool. Bursting Flare for the Destruction Warlocks is another one I would consider a tutorial trait.
So basically what he's saying is that these traits are supposed to teach people how to play their character in a way that the talent or the spellbook doesn't. Because casting Conflagrate on a target affected by your Immolate increases your mastery. So they're trying to incentivize further people playing their class in the right way. And here's what's going to happen. And this is something that Blizzard has still not realized, is that their players are so fucking stupid that they can't be saved from themselves. You can lead them to water, and they'll shit in it. Okay? That's what they're going to do. You can lead them to water, they will shit in it. And then they'll drink it, and they'll die. Okay? That's basically that's the WoW audience. And what this is going to do is it's going to create an artificial level of power gap, because you're going to have people that are so fucking terrible, they're already casting Conflag on targets without Immolate, and now they're not getting this bonus from Bursting Flare. This is the same problem that they have with procs right now, is because procs, they're very useful and very good for people that know how to use them and how to weave them into their rotations, but it's very bad for people that don't, because those people, not only do they not understand, and the procs are supposed to be free damage, but they also don't understand how to use them, so they're not using them properly, and it's actually a bigger gap in player power and in playability between like high level and low level players.
Casting Conflagrate on a target affected by your Immolate increases your mastery by 7 for 20 seconds, stacking up to 5 times. Now, for me, that's not only a decent bonus, but also it reminds people you should have Immolate on the target. And this is...
So you can't remind them that, because they spent like the whole time leveling up. They know that you have to have Immolate on the target. Like, if they're not going to read the Azerite traits, they're not going to read the spellbook either. And they're not going to read spellbook, they're not going to read the Azerite traits either. That's not a good thing. Like, creating artificial levels of difficulty that separate players and make it harder for players to integrate into the larger population of raiders, and create these different levels of knowledge that kind of hold people back is not good for the game at all.
Super basic stuff. I know most of my audience are not super basic players, but for super basic people picking up a new class, again, it's another reminder. You should have Immolate on the target. If you didn't realize you should, by having this trait, it says to you, you should have Immolate up, because doing Conflagrate with Immolate on is going to give you this bonus. Now, you're probably also going to say, the pessimists amongst you, well, does this mean that people who don't have this trait don't think they need Immolate on because they don't have Bursting Flare? It could go either way, but it seems to me like a step in the right direction to try and remind people how to play a class that maybe they've never played before.
I don't think it's going to work. I don't think this is a good idea.
They don't want to listen to a gobshite like me tell them what to do, or read a website, or go to a stream, or something like that. This is in-game, in front of their eyes, and it's something they could do. And I'm all for that. I'm a big supporter of that. The final things that I've marked in a light orange. These are the entirely passives. You can't do anything with them. They're going to happen regardless. They do nothing to your character's development whatsoever. Now, I want to be clear here. Tutorial traits do fall into that category for nearly every player. Like, this does nothing for most people. They can track the mastery and maybe fire off some Chaos Bolts at max mastery.
This is good.
The likelihood is after playing with it, is your shards build up so quick you can't really capitalize on it that way.
Okay.
But still, the next ones that I've marked in light orange, these are the ones that, like, this is really nothing you can do with it. Like, it happens whether you want it to or not. You can't make a decision based on it. It just happens. So these would be things like Avenger's Might. While Avenging Wrath is active, your mastery is increased.
See, this reminds me of the old talents in the old talent tree, right? And you'd get one of these every other level, and you could put the little button in, and you'd feel good about it. The problem and the difference between this and the old talent tree is that you only have 3 of these pieces of armor. You only get them whenever you get to max level, and the increases that they give you are pretty much minimal. So that's the problem. The difference is massive. And I mean, it reminds me of the old talent trees, but this is a bad way of adding that kind of stuff back, I think, because it's max level. And then players that level up don't really get any sense of, like, there's already a lot of max level progression anyway. This should be like a low level thing if they're going to do it.
So this is something that I'm going to press anyway, usually under different circumstances, such as I'm got more power at this point. I have all my other cooldowns ready. Now I'm going to use Avenging Wrath. Perhaps I have Bloodlust up. Perhaps I have a potion ready. Something like that. So it makes no difference whatsoever that it increases your mastery. That's not why you're activating it in any way. It's totally out of your control as to what it's supposed to do. Now, obviously, I think at this point we need to address, this is based on my judgment. I have taken my time in doing this. I've thought about them a lot. There will be definitely some people say, well, actually, I'm pretty sure I can make a choice on that, or I think that's more interesting than you're laying on. With so many traits, of which there are 112 traits, there will definitely be some crossover. There will absolutely be,
of course,
211 traits. Sorry, there are 211 traits currently in the game. There will definitely be some crossover. That's fine. This is just what I'm reading into. I'm not here to get into a semantic debate about one of the survival hunter traits, right? That's not my purpose here. I've been as lenient as I can, is what I will say. I've been as lenient as I possibly can. If there's even a semblance in my mind that you can make a reasonable choice or it affects your gameplay in some way, I have marked it as green, which means some of you are actually going to look at this and go, I know that trait, and that is not a green trait. That's fine. So let's take a look at the sheet then. This is every class and spec currently in Battle of Azeroth. I don't think I've...
Let me go back to this real quick. So the brown ones are the ones that, like, don't do anything. I don't think it's an accident that every BM trait is just a brown trait that doesn't do anything. Like, so BM Hunters, it's confirmed that they're just made for fucking dumbasses. And look at Frost, it doesn't have any green traits either. It's just, you just hit the fucking buttons, and nothing's gonna change. I love that Blizzard is actually, Mistweaver, I think Mistweaver is actually kind of hard to play. Look, Protection Paladin, that's a joke too. It's pretty easy to play. Rep Paladin only has 1 green. Yeah, look at this.
Spec. Currently in Battle of Azeroth, I don't think I've missed anything. I've been pretty
look at Fury
about going through everything. So
wait, what?
If I have missed something, my apologies, but it's surely nothing that's going to skew everything that's happening here. So as you can see, let's have a quick reminder. Anything marked in this light yellow color, this is something I consider a tutorial traits. So let's pick latent chill, just to give you another idea of this. Wowhead, latent chill.
Okay, we'll look at this.
There we go. Just a brief. I want to be super clear. So latent chill. Frost strike deals additional damage if you have at least 3 empty runes. So perhaps people aren't using frost strikes enough and don't understand how rune empowerment works. So rune empowerment, when you press frost strike, you have a chance to regenerate a rune. This is kind of pointing people is like, hey, do you have less runes? You know, are you running out of runes? Maybe you should frost strike, because it's not surprising for me to think that people are just pressing obliterate over and over and over and over again until they run dry, then going into frost strikes, rather than trying to manage that. So it says you're empty 3 runes, why don't you throw a frost strike in? Not only will it have a chance to regenerate a rune, but it'll give you some extra damage. Sounds pretty good, and therefore you'll get more runes to do more obliterates, and the spec starts to play.
I really don't think that's going to happen.
Some of you will go, that's just basic gameplay. I understand that.
Yeah.
I'm not dumb. But I consider that to be a tutorial trait of sorts. So again, if you think I'm being too lenient, that's probably for the best. Now, as you can see, there is no rhyme or reason to this. I was hoping to spot rhyme or reason. So I started to notice that tanks in BFA seemingly have entirely passives. Entirely passive. So if we have a look, like Blood.
Okay.
Entirely passive abilities, right? So remember,
well, tanks are easy,
orange,
so it makes
yellow,
sense.
they're still entirely passive. It's only green things you can make a choice with. Vengeance, but then Vengeance got 1 it could do something with, but also has very much less traits in general. Guardian then had 2. Okay, so Guardian's got 2, and then if we go down to Protection Paladin, they have none. They're entirely passive. And then Protection Warrior, that has 1. So I was like, okay, so it's like some have 2, some have 1, some have none. All right, is there any rhyme or reason there?
Okay.
What about healers? Well, Resto Druids, they got 2 things that they could do something with, in my opinion. You could disagree, that's fine. Holy got 1, which was Martyr's Breath we looked at earlier. Dis didn't get any, entirely passive, whereas Holy got 1. So it's like, okay. So what about Resto Shamans? Entirely passive. So
it's a joke class.
That doesn't work either. There's no rhyme or reason to that either. What about classes overall? Well, as you can see, DK's got entirely passives, whereas Druids got a whole bunch of stuff they could choose from. They got Feral has 3, Balance has 2, Resto has 2, Guardian has 2. All right, well, Havoc got 2, but then Monks only got 1 that I felt they could really make a choice with, which was Swift Roundhouse. Paladins only got 2, so there's no balance here. there's no balance. Some specs have 2, some have 1, some have none. But then I started to think maybe it's armor specific. Is it like, because basically the way I did it is I went through all the heads and then filled out the gaps with the stuff that was missing afterwards. So this head was like entirely passive. Okay. But this one wasn't. But this one was, and then this one wasn't, and this one was, and this one. So there was no rhyme or reason to it there. And as far as I could tell, there is no rhyme or reason to how these are spread out into the game, which is confusing. Because if there was a pattern we could follow, then that would kind of make sense, is to understand the sources of gear better, make choices better, so on and so forth. But we can't really do that. Because it doesn't work that way. Some classes have more than others. As you can see, Dis has 7. Most classes, as you can see, have 6 each. That's what we sorted while going through there. Overall, 17%, so an excruciatingly low number, are something you can actually make a choice with. And that's also very skewed by Druids just having quite a lot comparative to others. But 17% of the 211 choices, so 36 of them, are actually something you do something with. Which is, if we look at it overall, 1, that's very low. That's very, very low. And in some cases, it's 0.
So let me talk about this for a minute. And now that we've listened to this, so obviously he's created his own different rating system, and so based off of his rating system, there are these discrepancies. Whenever you create your own rating system, all of that is subject for discussion, etc. Also, on top of that, there are a lot of traits, and I feel like Blizzard has done this, and the different classes have had like tier sets and artifact traits and artifact abilities and stuff like that that are based off of what the class is before the artifact. They're supposed to complete the class in that different way. So I think to look at each of these different specs and say they don't have Azerite traits for this different spec and say this is how it should be for all of them, or they should have this many, interactive traits, this many passive ones, etc. I think that's only a partial picture because you have to look at the entire class. But I do think the Azerite traits, as I said before, are not particularly interesting.
A DK, for example, just zero. I felt personally there wasn't much we could do in terms of choice there that changed the way you would play in any particular way. And again, some of you might disagree and say it's better than this or worse than this, which would most likely be the case because I have been pretty generous with this process.
One thing I also want to say is that Preach knows way more about this than I do. I have spent little to no time on the beta. I've looked at this stuff on my own time. Yes, I have. I've seen what it is, but he understands it a lot more than I do.
A very weird system, but one thing we can say is, one, the chances of getting something that develops your class beyond what it gets at 100, level 100, is pretty small. Pretty small. At best, in a lot of cases, you're looking at maybe one trait, which might be something like up close and personal. Let's have a look at what that is. So this is what I feel is like the most exciting thing you've got to look forward to
for a survival hunter.
Survival hunter that actually
most exciting thing to look forward to as a survival hunter is to finally realize that you're doing everything wrong in respect to marksman or BM.
Has an effect. I actually know what this is. This is Harpoon increases your Raptor Strike damage, I believe. Wowhead, up close and personal. No, it's not finding it on Wowhead, which is a shame. Let's pick another one. Let's pick Galvanizing Spark.
Oh, Arcane Mage. Spark. Those are dangerous. They go all over the place.
We've got it. So for Arcane, was it Arcane? Brainstorm. Yeah, Brainstorm was a mixed one. Arcane Blast deals an additional 34 damage as a 10% chance to generate a second Arcane Charge.
This basically could be a tier set 2-set bonus. Like, really, I mean, I'm pretty sure there have been tier sets that have had 2-set bonuses that are similar to this, right? Arcane Blast can have a 10% chance to generate an Arcane Charge. It is not necessarily a amazing trait. It is not that great. I wouldn't be super excited about it, but it does change gameplay to an extent, and it does add another level of basically RNG, but it could be playability and iterative and agile gameplay, right? Where like you have to change what you're doing based off of different random events, which are problematic in one way, but interesting in another way.
I mean, that's just like it jumps from 1 to 3. So if you don't know, Arcane stacks 4 Arcane Charges. So suddenly, instead of having 1, 2, 3, 4, it might go 1, 2, 4. That's about it in terms of class development from what I can see with the Arcane Mage, really. Again, these are like the best I could find as far as I'm concerned. Thought Harvester, which one was this one? I wish I could remember the individuals. I do remember most of them, but still. But I think my point is pretty clear here in terms of limited class development over the course of BFA as far as I can see. Casting Vampiric Touch increases the damage of your next Mind Blast, is what it is. Yeah, Mind Blast by 157.
Okay.
So if you're going, that makes the choice like, oh, I'm about to do a Mind Blast, maybe I should do Vampiric Touch beforehand. That doesn't work in the timings of Shadow, but Shadow's in a bit of a mess anyway. But
okay.
What it does suggest, and I think we need to be clear on here, these traits are not balanced. So you're seeing these numbers. Even though, yeah, okay, you might be thinking to yourself, well, at least I've got something that I can look forward to, right? Maybe this is something I can look forward to. Realistically, the odds at this point, considering the chances of picking something that actually develops your character in some way, are actually very low. Very, very low. Because obviously it's like 1/6 of the traits is actually something that you can do something with. The chances of that being the best one are also pretty small as well. It might turn out to be the case. Great. It might not. Chances are it won't, based on just odds. It's very unlikely that Winter's Reach, for example, which is a flurry proc, would dominate everything else to the point where you just want Winter's Reach.
Check the WoW forums.
Something to bear in mind. You might use.
Oh wow! Oh, apparently there's like a blue post about me on the WoW forums. We're gonna look at that after this, okay, guys?
Use a mix of them. you can stack the traits. Okay, so you can stack the traits up if you want multiple of the same trait and you want to try and pick up, say, I want 3 Frigid Grasps. Well, yes, this one's on a chest, but I could also get Frigid Grasp on a head. I could get it on a pair of shoulders, and I might want to stack that up 3 times. Now, it won't do anything other than increase, say, the intellect proc, I believe, on this one, which might be very dominant because it's during your DPS cooldowns. So it might turn out to be that despite the fact that, yes, you do have some choices, they're not the best either. Which again reduces your class development even further because what you're doing is stuff you would do anyway. That's my point. If you're picking any of these talents, as far as I'm concerned, or these traits, I should say, if you are going with, say, Whiteout, you're not actually changing anything you wouldn't be doing anyway, and your character still plays identically to what it did at level 100. That's my point. The greens are stuff that does change once you hit level 120. As you can see, there's not very many of them. So ultimately, it seems for the most part, your character will play pretty much the same, despite the number that pops off the target's head as it does at level 100. For me,
yeah,
that's what I see here. You guys might see something different, and I'm really open to some discussion on that, but I'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that's brought that to light. I will happily see people say, actually, Font of Life allows you to do this. I'm going to check it just because I chose that one. I'm going to check it.
Let's see, what does Font of Life do? What does it do? Passive. Let's find out.
Your Essence Font's initial heal is increased by 26 and has
Increase
a chance
cooldown
to reduce the cooldown of... It's entirely passive. It's like the thing you do there. You might get Thunder Focus back a little early.
I don't even know what Thunder Focus is. I don't know if that's good or not. I have no idea.
I don't think any Mistweaver would ever do this. Essence Font to try and get Thunder Focus D back quicker. I'll let the Mistweavers decide whether that's a good decision or not. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you again. Love to see your thoughts on this. This is what I see. Am I being pessimistic? Am I not? Let me know. See you again. Bye-bye.
Okay. So that was a good video, right? I mean, for the most part, I think it was pretty good. The thing about that, I didn't know it was going to be as spreadsheety, right? If I knew that, we wouldn't have done it on stream. It doesn't mean it's a bad video. It just means that obviously, you know, for people watching on stream, it would be better if it wasn't like as much of a spreadsheet. I did not know that. But thank you guys very much for watching that. I agree with a lot of this. However, you know, whenever he creates the list, you know, he's using his own parameters, and so judging Blizzard based off of his parameters is different than judging Blizzard based off what they are doing, and so I don't really know, but that's my opinion.